And here we are, a single frame in a storm of chaos, a leaf suspended in the ravenous winds that rip and tear everything you might have once appreciated. So, seeing as I have you for a bit on this little leaf, let's talk a bit, yeah? Watching Rings of Power Season 2 brought me to this point of thinking to myself, why? Why do so many modern adaptations stray so far from this source material? It's a question that's plagued fans of fantasy, sci-fi, and gaming alike, especially with the recent examples like The Rings of Power, The Wheel of Time, Halo, The Witcher. Despite it not being out, Yakuza is also a very good example, considering Amazon literally told the cast to not play the games to explore the characters from scratch. Yeah, because that went great with the aforementioned Rings of Power and Wheels of Time. These shows have, or are continuing to, in their own ways, deviate from the stories and characters that originally captivated audience, often to the dismay of the most passionate fans. Why settle for rich, complex narratives that fans adore when you can just reimagine everything to better suit your vision? Instead of honoring the essence and intricate worlds that fans have cherished, they embark on a path of reimagining, often losing sight of the core themes and character dynamics that define these works. This Yap session will explore the reasons behind this trend, questioning whether these creative liberties stem from genuine innovation or a misplaced sense of superiority. Okay, no, that's a lie. I'm going to be very biased on this, but occasionally I will try and do my best to take a sort of middle line, but I'll tell you up front right now, I'm super biased when it comes to this topic. I mean, it's almost as if these writers think they're so much smarter than the original creators. Instead of honoring the essence and intricate worlds that fans have cherished, they attempt to, and 9 times out of 10, fail to, reimagine the franchise, often losing sight of the core themes and character dynamics that define the works. No, let's just rip out the heart of the story and replace it with whatever trendy nonsense is hot right now in a modernization program. After all, who needs authenticity or faithfulness to source material when you can have, well, whatever they're pumping out nowadays? Because nothing says respect for legacy quite like tearing it to shreds. The ego. That marvelous little voice in a writer's head that whispers, you know what, you could do this better. It's the same voice that convinced your dearest mother that she could cut your hair better than a professional, and we all know how that turned out. Unless she's a professional herself, in which case this little analogy kind of falls apart, in which case you are exempt. Yet, here we are, watching writers with more ego than talent butcher franchises like drunk toddlers with safety scissors. Let's chat a bit about these visionaries who think they can improve on the original works. You know the type. They've probably written a few mediocre screenplays, maybe even got one produced for a straight-to-streaming movie that you would only watch if you were paid to, and still regret it after the fact. But somehow they've convinced themselves that they're the next J.R.R. Tolkien or perhaps George R. Martin. You know, I wish that I had the amount of self-confidence that these hacks do. Improve on the original, you might ask. How? Well, apparently by stripping away everything that made the source material beloved in the first place. It's like trying to improve a gourmet meal by dousing it in ketchup. Sure, you changed it, but calling it an improvement is a stretch even Elastigirl would struggle with. These writers, bless their hearts, seem to operate under the delusion that their half-baked ideas are somehow superior to the carefully crafted worlds and the characters that have captivated audiences for decades. It's as if they believe that by changing everything, they're not just adapting the work, but elevating it. They are very much not, unless it's like this very rare circumstances, but we'll come to that later on. But let's not forget the cherry on top of this little ego treat, the utter lack of respect or understanding for the source material before adapting it. It's almost impressive how some of these adaptations manage to miss the point so spectacularly. It's like they skimmed the Wikipedia summary, decided it was too complicated and opted to instead write fanfiction. Imagine hiring a chef who's never tasted the dish they're supposed to recreate. That's essentially what's happening when writers tackle adaptations without bothering to understand what made the original work so special. They're so busy trying to leave their mark on it that they forget that they're supposed to be translating someone else's vision, not rewriting it entirely. The result is a Frankenstein's monster of an adaptation that bears about as much resemblance to its source material as a pug does to a wolf. It's got some of the DNA, sure, but somewhere along the line something went horribly and sometimes hilariously wrong, and that's the best case scenario. Now so far I've just thrown a bit of a word salad at you. I know you're probably listening like, bro's just making general statements. Maybe you had a couple shows in mind when talking about this kind of thing, so do I. Rather than leave it to your imagination, let's name and shame. I've realized from some of my other videos that leaving things open to interpretation is going to invite some fools in. Actually, even if I make it painfully obvious what I'm talking about, there's still going to be some melt who's going to be like, you say you like pancakes, that means you hate waffles. Honestly, when it comes to sheer utter hubris and adaptation, it doesn't get worse than Halo. So I'm not the biggest Halo guy, so I'll just voice the opinions of the experts based on the discourse I've taken in. Straight up, heading into it, the showrunner has already put a bad taste into people's mouths by stating he wanted to avoid the games and take the canon as a whole to develop it further. What that means, I have no idea, because he backtracks later by stating he did play the game, he just, I don't know, zoomed out for a more holistic perspective? Well, not holistic enough, buddy, cause bro didn't build on anything. He changed it. Now, I'd like to state that changing in order to tell a story is not inherently bad, but when you head into a property with deeply complex characters, years of history, a fan base that know their shit, and then tear it up to make it deep, brother, I don't know what to tell you, and it's the hubris of thinking they can do better than whatever this IP did, not in conjunction with it, but despite it. In this example, ew, an icky video game, so childish, let's make it deep by having our main character constantly show his baby face and flash his butt cheeks on screen. Fuck up Cortana beyond belief and slap her dumbass into the sneako chair in the corner. Oh, but more character development. Motherfucker, they tore the helmet off of Master Cheeks with the speed, no build up, no reason, just tore that shit off for a character we don't know. That's not development, that's wanting your lead to show his face more, because, I don't know, you think that either the idea of not showing his face is dumb and video gamey, or because you can't be bothered with the extra effort of directing someone without facial expressions. The latter is lazy as fuck, cause Mandalorian is right there, and the former misunderstands the entire bleeding character. So, what we have left is a show which doesn't expand on anything good, but shows us shit that we don't want to see, like Master Chief clapping cheeks and wasted plot points with a battle-hardened main character barely in combat get-up. Now, you could argue that this is to explore the character away from combat scenarios for us to connect with him more, but it misunderstands that people already connected with the character with his helmet and armor on non-stop. So if you're making extra steps for yourself for no goddamn reasons, perhaps your approach needs to be re-examined. But you know what? Just like my sixth form politics teacher always told me, always use recent examples to contextualize, because it demonstrates an up-to-date application of your argument. In that spirit, let's go over a show I already covered here on this channel, probably like 3 times, Star Wars Acolyte. Because apparently Disney looked at the rich, complex lore of Star Wars and thought, you know what this needs? A rehash of the same events with slight tonal changes and a more morally nuanced. Psst, that's code for there is no good guy, because we don't like the idea of there being a defined good and bad, because it compromises our personal moral values. Set of characters. Star Wars Acolyte is a show directed by Leslie Headland. Les, as I will adoringly call her from this point onwards, which I won't actually call her that because I won't mention her name for the rest of this video. She had the not so difficult task of creating a show based on the High Republic era, an era with plenty of books written on it, a series which I have not read and would have liked to see adapted onto the big screen, based on its generally positive reception. Unfortunately, the powers that be decided, nah, I'm gonna do my own thing, by which they mean leech off the same set of events of the prequel trilogy of finding extremely force-sensitive children born under mysterious circumstances and no father, mentored by wise mentor figures with an unknown Sith running around. Regardless, parallel storytelling is alright, just as long as they don't start fucking around with the Anakin Skywalker thing and focus on the plethora of stories telling the High Republic. Well, shit. Guess we're making the born and no father thing a bit of a galactic party trick. So the cancellation of the show makes me feel both relieved and irritated. Relieved, because oh my god, thank god they weren't able to mutilate Star Wars further, but also irritated because it just implies that Anastasia was casually strong enough to tap into the virgins and make Force babies, something the strongest Force users struggle greatly with and indeed found it impossible to do. So we never are going to get any sort of explanation on that or build upon it. Now Plagueis is basically just always going to be known as that cave-dwelling dude in the corner that ripped them off. You know, it's somewhat impressive how spectacularly they've missed the point. There's quite literally no reason for this show to exist. It shoves a whole sequence of events that should not have been connected to the prequel trilogy into the timeline, so that the whole thing is like, okay, so you know the thing that was supposed to be the first time it ever happened, and before that point there was an era of absolute peace? Well, what if it wasn't? Either of those things. And before you babble on about Lucas changing things all the time, that's his ball, his court. He made it, his rules. And at the very least, he had the decency of doing things for the purpose of telling a story with a message. For the life of me, I cannot tell what the hell the point of the Acolyte was. Jedi can be bad, I guess. I mean, that's the point that I got. I don't know. It's a show that feels about a Star Wars as a tribble at Star Wars Celebration. So the Acolyte is a shining example of what happens when writers think they're smarter than the source material and understand it as well as anyone else. It's not an expansion of the Star Wars universe. If anything, it's a demolition. Graffiti art on the side that looks very ugly. Anyways, getting a bit ranty here. The choreography and Master Soul are excluded from these criticisms as they alone made the show worth somewhat watching. So, here we are, watching writers play fantasy Mad Libs with well-known franchises, all because they couldn't be bothered to understand the source material or to give it the respect it deserves. A failure to rein in egos. It's enough to make you wonder, is it too much to ask for adaptations that actually adapt rather than mutilate? Expand as opposed to destroy, because look, I'm not against changing things in an adaptation to create interesting new situations with these characters. I mean, you can't say Joker, the movie, is a one-to-one adaptation of the character. That's a commentary on the whole abandonment of the mentally ill thing. And despite what you may think about the movie being better off without tying into the IP, it's still good. Really good, even. Changing an adaptation isn't inherently bad. It's bad when you pretend like you're trying to adapt something from its original form and then turn around and add your own tidbits and minor changes, acting like it doesn't change the dynamic of the whole damn story. And no, I'm not talking about race swapping or whatever the hell. That's a different story of like a different can of worms I don't want to get into. I mean changes for no real reason, which recontextualize and change our understandings of the characters. Let's take the Wheel of Time show for example. I fucking hate this show, but I'm gonna try and keep on track. The Wheel of Time, once again by Amazon, is the crown jewel of pointless changes that indicate an apparent carelessness in the craft of the show. The Wheel of Time is a book series which has been crafted so expertly as a constant series of threads so that the end result is something I would only describe as intricately constructed, massive interlocking webs of fine narratives, and in my opinion stands as one of the greatest examples of high fantasy I have ever read. As such, when taking such a work into consideration for adaptation, it's imperative that you at least recognize it, if not understand, how things click into place, from the smaller tidbits of info to the defining traits of each character which make them who they are and inform us about the whats, the whys, the hows of the choices they make, to the power scaling which so clearly sets out the drawn boundaries between Saidar and Saidin, which allocate clear importance to both male and female channelers of the one power, to the clashing cultures and many peoples of the Randlands. When adapting something so gargantuan, subtlety is an absolute requirement. There is no way you can adapt everything. It's an impossibility, as features in the novel would simply fail to translate to a television medium. However, chops and changes should be made with carefulness to avoid collapsing the web. And that is the exact opposite of what happened. What we have here is a wrecking ball that swung through and has obliterated and bastardized the aforementioned web, leaving us with a crudely constructed, barely coherent, baffling mishmash of ideas and plot lines. Changes in chops which I cannot help but find myself despising. The show's disregard for the source material extends far beyond mere surface level alterations. By fundamentally altering mythology surrounding the dragon, the adaptation strips away crucial elements that gave weight and significance to Rand's journey. The decision to make the dragon's identity ambiguous for an unnecessary amount of time. I mean, really, you could have spent so much of that screen time focusing on actual things that matter, rather than constantly trying to lead us around on a wild goose chase of, oh, is that the dragon? Is she the dragon? Is he the dragon? You don't know. Yes, I do. And so do the audience. This mishandling of core elements bleeds into character development, particularly evident in the treatment of Egwene and Nynaeve. Their accelerated mastery of channeling, achieved without the requisite training or struggle, transforms them into unrealistically powerful figures that overshadow Rand's own growth. This imbalance robs the story of its carefully crafted power dynamics and character arcs that are integral to the original narrative. I was initially impressed with Nynaeve, as she was my personal favorite, tied with Min and Moiraine, of the official female crew. She was robbed of oomph very quickly though. Her initial breakthrough scene against Lorgain makes no sense when you realize that when she unleashes her power and he covers his eyes, he can't see shit. Users of Saidin cannot see Saidar and vice versa, so what the fuck is bro covering his eyes against? Oh, the debris and the winds, you say? Bullshit, there is not a single blast of anything but light in that shot, and any excuse otherwise is them trying to cover their asses. The showrunner's approach, seemingly prioritizing shock value over storytelling integrity, further exacerbates these issues. By actively courting controversy and alienating longtime fans, the production team demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of what made the source material resonate with readers in the first place. The absence of nuance and detail, hallmarks of Jordan's writing, is glaringly apparent. The richly textured world-building, intricate magic system, diverse cultural tapestries that define the books have been reduced to shallow facsimiles. This simplification strips away the layers of complexity that made the original work so engrossing. Again, a one-to-one translation is not feasible. However, the defense of there not being enough runtime to explore every concept is not justification for the butchering of the IP. The problem lies not in the quantity of content, but in its quality. A well-crafted narrative can be told concisely, while a poorly conceived one will flounder regardless of runtime. The show's shortcomings stem from a lack of thoughtful adaptation rather than time constraints. I do not expect to see everything from the books, but I expect to see a version of the events with the same characters being explored in this new medium in meaningful ways. Instead, we have a glorified fanfic, with the consequences of all those added tidbits and changed characters, removal of core scenes, and reassigned roles racking up as the episodes go on. More added scenes, more strength from the source material to justify the actions and events of the changes that came before, which therefore caused further alienation, eventually resulting in an entirely different, mutilated monstrosity of a chopped up narrative barely stitched together. Key plot points and character development suffer from subpar subpar execution. Significant events such as Green's capture or the recovery of the horn, Matt's memory returning feel rushed and devoid of emotional weight. The growth of characters like Perrin and his connection to wolves, Rand's journey to becoming a blade master are all given short thrift, robbing these characters of their transformative power. Suddenly Rand is using a sword for no particular reason, and Ishamael flops down and dies after letting himself get stabbed. But most egregious is the treatment of Rand himself. By diminishing his centrality to the narrative, the adaptation undermines the very themes it purports to explore. The immense pressure of being like a prophesized savior of the world, the internal struggle between hope and damnation, the weight of the world's expectations while fighting the urge of madness. All these crucial elements are lost when Rand is relegated to the sidelines in favor of assigning all of his moments to the supporting cast. It feels like this whole damn show is building up to a maybe the real Dragon Reborn was the friends we made along the way, with a whole damn ensemble crowded around Rand when he faces down Ishamael. Not all characters need to be capable of forsaken slaying insanely powerful channelers. They all have their roles. Instead, they're being treated interchangeably. The show's attempt to distribute narrative focus more evenly among the ensemble cast backfires spectacularly. Without establishing Rand as the linchpin around which other characters orbit, the story loses its gravitational center. As previously mentioned, if Jordan created a web, then Rand is the center of that web, as the Targaryen around which event circulates, as the Dragon Reborn. But you can barely tell in the show because it tries to cut out Rand and focus on other characters, and then spend a not so little amount of time on pointless plot lines like Lan and Moiraine arguing because the actor they have for Moiraine happens to be a star and the lead for the show. Prophecies that should have imbued his character with significance are left underdeveloped, leaving audiences with little reason to invest in his journey or the concept of the dragon itself. I wish I could say it was Amazon's fault for fucking it up, but it's unfortunately just the writers they hire. There's a whole ass draft leak from the writers before Amazon toned it down presumably, and oh my god! Camera moves through the darkness and we see two silhouettes against one of the walls. Danya's holding on to one of the ceiling beams with her strong arms, her legs wrapped around a man's shoulders. He's shirtless, head hidden beneath her skirt. Note, all sex scenes in 101 will be focused on the pleasure of women. Likewise, the female body should be seen as strong and in control in these scenes. Oh my god. Okay. Alright, Jesus of all that is holy, Matt, my boy, what did they do to you? All bro ever wanted was a kiss on the cheek and a hug from a lovely dame, and they got him eating someone out on the first episode. And that ain't even it. Rand banging a queen on some fucking table, even though they really didn't get that far, which is why Rand had such a big reaction to sleeping with Aviendha for the first time. See below. For that matter, he remembered when Nynaeve called Kimri, Lewin, and Bar Dowtree in Bar's father's hayloft. Blah blah blah. The woman's circle had nearly skinned poor Bar alive, and that was nothing to what they had done to Kimri over the month they thought was the shortest decent time to wait for a wedding. They slept together, got caught, and immediately got married to each other on the spot, forcefully, and got their asses beaten for it. And now suddenly we're over here giving Uck to random people for no reason. And for those of you saying they aged it up, I don't give a fuck. Truly, this is not Game of Thrones. It will never be Game of Thrones, nor should it try to be. I get what they mean by making the show more mature, but this isn't more mature. This is edgy. This is a teenager's idea of mature. This is them making Matt give Uck to some random chick and Rand start banging a queen for no reason other than the writers to beat their meat while they wrote this shit. It's the minor changes like this that build up and make it feel nothing like the intricate world that book readers know and nowhere near as interesting. For example, after Rand does sleep with Aviendha, he makes the dumb farm boy comment of having to get married to her because obviously they slept together and that's what the circle did. But Aviendha just blows him off because that's not how shit works with the Aiel. Obviously not a major thing, but interesting nonetheless. In its misguided efforts to subvert expectation and create a more ensemble feel without doing any of the legwork for it, the adaptation has sacrificed the very core of what made the Wheel of Time a masterpiece of fantasy literature in the first place, while refusing to do any of the necessary progression to give weight to the ensemble itself. The result is a pale imitation that fails to capture the essence of its source material, leaving newcomers and longtime fans adrift in a sea of missed opportunities and squandered potential. So, moving back to the larger picture before I get more lost in the source, we've acknowledged now that there are serious mishandlings of IPs in the writer's room, either through hubris, misunderstanding, or at the heart of all of these adaptations' failures, a lack of respect for the original works. Instead of engaging with what made the stories resonate with audiences, they rejected it and often feel compelled to impose their own quote-unquote improvements, with obviously The Witcher and Halo being prime examples. So these adaptations fail when they attempt to overwrite the existing narrative structure rather than build on it. Good adaptations, such as The Last of Us, succeed because they honor the source material while carefully integrating necessary changes to suit the new medium. Rather than completely rewriting the source material, the most successful adaptations build upon the original. They understand the core elements that made the original work and then expand on them rather than subvert them. For instance, in The Last of Us, while there are minor changes to the storyline, the adaptation never loses sight of the core relationship between Joel and Ellie, which made the game so impactful, which really contrasts sharply with adaptations like Halo, where superficial changes fail to adapt and alienate core fans. Now, while The Last of Us certainly wasn't perfect, in my opinion, it chopped out a lot of big set pieces and action sequences in favor of a more I'm gonna throw some dirt in your eye type of approach via emotional gut punches. Few too many gut punches in my opinion. I got the idea by the end of it that they just wanted me to cry, and realizing that stopped my tears full stop. Either way, still heads and shoulders above everything else I've mentioned so far, without a single shadow of a doubt. Now, while I could take this opportunity to riff on Rings of Power, nah, I'm above that. No, I'm not. I'm just waiting for the series to end. The importance of understanding and appreciating the core elements of the original material cannot be overstated. Successful adaptations recognize that it's not just about replicating the plot, but about grasping emotional and thematic hearts of the work that they're adapting. They identify the aspects of the characters and narrative that resonate with audiences and focus on maintaining that essence and building on top of it. A faithful adaptation respects those roots and seeks to enhance them, not replace them with entirely new creations that bear only superficial resemblances to the original, piggybacking the successes of a franchise to push a vision that would otherwise receive zero traction. I believe Snow White will be the perfect example for this when it does come out. So, when crafting an adaptation, creators decide where innovation is necessary and where fidelity is paramount. It should be done with clear understandings of the themes and character arcs that must remain intact. In other words, writers need to stay in their goddamn lane. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. In the end, the success or failure of an adaptation boils down to a simple principle: respect for the source material. Rage baiting may generate temporary buzz, but a long-term success requires a deeper engagement with the original. The most beloved adaptations aren't the ones that reinvent the wheel, they are the ones that amplify the strengths of the source material while embracing the new possibilities of the mediums. Like Lord of the Rings, which always felt like a Tolkien work, even when it occasionally faltered. Anyway, I yapped enough. Follow on Twitter or join the Discord, but subscription to that channel is mandatory. Sorry, I don't make the rules. Bye bye.